Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Retro Hardware. Now today we've actually gotten a lot of requests on the system that we're going to spotlight today. So unlike prior episodes where we feature an obscure failed system, today we're going to cover the very successful and well-known Commodore 64. Under the hood of the Commodore 64 was an 8-bit MOS technology 6510 CPU running at 1 megahertz. Now that's 1 megahertz, not gigahertz. And for those of you who aren't good at math, 1 megahertz, that's 0.001 gigahertz. Graphically, the C64 had a resolution of 320 by 200, it had a palette of 16 colors, and for sound, it had 3 separate programmable oscillators for generating chiptunes. Finally, it had 64 kilobytes of RAM, and that's where the C64 got its name from. To put things in perspective, 64 kilobytes, well, that's about 4 seconds of your favorite MP3 song. Among the peripherals for the C64 were a mouse, a floppy disk drive, a 300 baud modem, and a dataset drive that actually took the same cassettes that some of your hipster friends record music on. Oh, mixtapes, how I miss thee. Released in 1982 by Commodore International, Commodore 64 sold between 12 and 17 million units during its 12-year life cycle. Much of what made the Commodore 64 so successful was Commodore's acquisition of MOS technology. They were a chip factory. Now, by owning this factory, Commodore was able to keep the costs down and quality control very tight. So the Commodore 64 debuted with a street price of $595. At the time, comparable machines from Apple and Atari cost twice that. Now, this business strategy was actually the same strategy that Texas Instruments had used years before earlier to almost bankrupt Commodore when the two of them had competed in the scientific calculator market. Some people actually believe that the Commodore 64's success was largely driven by CEO Drac Chamrell's personal vendetta against Texas Instruments. In fact, Texas Instruments was pushed out of the personal computer market by the Commodore 64. When you started up the C64, there were several things you could do. The software came in various forms: floppy, cassette tape, or cartridge. And much like the consoles today, you just popped it in and started it up. The C64 had a huge library of games, as in 20,000. Now, it'd be impossible for me to go through all of them, so here are a couple highlights. These included the game series, which were the winter, summer, and California games, because yeah, that's what we love to do here in California. BMX, skateboard, and hacky sack. The Last Ninja, an isometric action-adventure game in which you collected items, solved puzzles, and engaged in oh-so-sweet ninja action. And Turrican, a roaming platform action game that was a badass combination between Contra and Metroid that really pushed the limits of what the C64 could do. But aside from floppies, cartridges, and tapes, there was another way of getting software onto your computer. You could write it yourself. Now, back in the day, a major selling point for any prospective computer buyer was the ability to write your own software. And one of the main features of the Commodore 64 was that it booted into Commodore BASIC. Commodore BASIC is a simple programming language used to write games and other software. Now, at the time, there were magazines, mostly in Europe, that published source code which could be input into the computer and run. So, apparently before the internet, people got their software through print media. The C64 provided a home for the demo scene, a subculture of artists and programmers who created real-time art pieces that really pushed the limits of the Commodore hardware. These demo groups would later go on to influence and in some cases become the game developers of our era. This year actually marks the 30th anniversary of the Commodore 64, so congratulations, Commodore. Now, Commodore actually filed for bankruptcy in 1994, but there still remains a strong fan following for the system. So much in fact that a third-party manufacturer has begun making Commodore 64 remakes, which is actually just a compact Intel computer stuffed into a Commodore 64 shell. If you're actually interested in trying out real Commodore 64 hardware, they're pretty easy to find on eBay. You can also play them through emulators. They're available on almost every platform, even iOS and Android. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for watching. Happy collecting.